Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at something a little different. You might be interested in architecture. Maybe you're prepping for a presentation or just, curious about how buildings make us feel,
Yeah.
right? Like just that kind of intangible thing. So today's deep dive, it's going to be a juicy one. We're going to be exploring a pretty heated debate between two big names in architecture.
Oh, yeah.
Peter Eisenman and Christopher Alexander. I mean, these guys are titans in the field. And they had some pretty strong opinions about what makes a building good.
Right.
So we've got this transcript of a debate they had back in 1982.
Oh, wow.
It's a long one, but we're going to be like ringside seats to this intellectual boxing match.
I love that.
And we're going to extract the core of their arguments. Plus, all those little juicy details that make this way more than just an academic debate.
Yeah, and what makes it so fascinating is it goes way beyond, just what looks good or, someone's personal preference.
Yeah.
We're getting into the philosophy of design.
Oh, yeah.
Wrestling with questions like, should architecture comfort us? Or should it kind of challenge us?
Ooh.
Is it about harmony or dissonance?
I love that.
And, whose feelings actually matter when we're talking about, the places we build and live in.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1982. The stage is set, and you can just feel the tension. Like you could cut it with a drafting knife. Mm. On one side, we have Peter Eisenman.
Ah, yes.
He's kind of like the rebel architect, right? Known for those designs that are a little unconventional, even jarring sometimes. Like he was all about pushing boundaries and questioning the very rules of architecture.
Totally.
And then on the other side, we've got Christopher Alexander,
right?
A champion for what they call human-centered design. He was really concerned with creating spaces that feel harmonious, connected to the people using them, responsive to human needs.
Yeah, he was all about making spaces that really work for people.
Right, exactly. So right out of the gate, Eisenman, he does something pretty clever. He starts by kind of agreeing with Alexander, saying that architecture needs a new worldview, one that moves beyond just the purely functional stuff, and really embraces a deeper understanding of human experience.
Okay, so he's finding common ground, right?
Right. Total classic move. Find some common ground before you lay down the attack. But then
here it comes.
He takes this agreement in a totally surprising direction.
Okay.
He starts connecting Alexander's ideas to the French structuralists.
Oh, the structuralists.
Those intellectuals who were obsessed with uncovering hidden systems of order, even in things that seemed chaotic.
Right. Right.
And let's just say Alexander was not a fan.
Yeah, that's where things get spicy.
Oh, absolutely. He rejects that association hard.
I bet.
Saying that the structuralists miss the entire point of architecture. Feeling. He's like, architecture isn't just an intellectual game. It's about evoking a response.
Yeah.
Creating spaces that resonate with our deepest human needs.
He's saying a building should make you feel something.
Mm-hmm. And not just in a, superficial way.
Yeah.
But on a deeper level, affecting your well-being, your connection to the environment, even your understanding of your place in the world.
That's a powerful idea.
It is. And then things get even more interesting when Eisenman kind of seems to accuse Alexander of being too emotional.
Ooh, that's got a sting.
Right. Letting his feelings cloud his judgment.
So we're seeing a real clash of styles here.
Oh, yeah. This is a fundamental difference in how they view the purpose of architecture.
Okay, I'm hooked.
So for Alexander, feeling is paramount. It's the measure of a building's success. But for Eisenman, it's more about the intellectual side, challenging assumptions, pushing the boundaries of what architecture can be.
Okay, so we've got this battle brewing, feeling versus intellect, harmony versus dissonance. And I bet it's about to get even hotter.
You bet it does, Alexander. He's like, okay, enough with the abstract theories. Let's talk about real buildings. And he throws down the gauntlet. He wants to use concrete examples to show how their views differ.
Ooh, he's calling him out.
And he chooses the most powerful example he can think of.
Which?
Chartres Cathedral.
Oh, wow.
That iconic masterpiece of Gothic architecture. He's saying this is the epitome of great design.
It's a bold move.
It is. It embodies everything. Alexander values harmony, spirituality, a deep connection to human experience.
So what does Eisenman say?
Oh, he doesn't even flinch. He flat out rejects Chartres, calls it a relic of the past, something that just doesn't speak to the complexities of the modern world.
Oh, man, I am on the edge of my seat.
Me too. This is where the debate gets really interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
It turns into this battle of the buildings, each architect throwing out examples that support their side, Alexander's looking for structures that embody harmony and wholeness.
Right.
But Eisenman, he's drawn to those spaces that challenge and provoke, sometimes even creating a sense of unease.
So like completely different approaches.
Totally. And the specific buildings they pick are so revealing. Alexander's pulling examples from traditional architecture, emphasizing natural materials, human scale, that connection to the surrounding environment. But Eisenman, he's into those more avant-garde structures, often with unconventional forms, unexpected spatial relationships, a real break from tradition.
It's not just about how they look, though, right?
No, they're analyzing them on a deeper level. Asking, what does this building say about our relationship to the world? How does it make us feel? What does it tell us about the architect's intentions, the cultural context?
Whoa, things are getting deep.
They are. So remember how we were talking about Alexander's focus on feeling? Well, he brings up this fascinating example that really drives the point home.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
The sloped roof.
The sloped roof.
Yeah, the kind you see on traditional houses. That gentle slope that sheds rain and snow.
Okay.
It might seem like a weird thing to get passionate about.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear this.
But Alexander, he argues that it has this primal power, a connection to nature and human experience that's missing from a lot of modern buildings.
Okay.
He sees it as a symbol of shelter protection from the elements that speaks to our need for security. And it's not just about the function either. He believes the sloped roof evokes this sense of comfort, familiarity, even a connection to our past.
Interesting.
And he contrasts it with the flat roofs of modern buildings, which he sees as like cold, impersonal, detached from the human experience.
So he's really making a statement about what he thinks architecture should be.
He is. He's not just building structures.
Yeah.
He's creating environments that nourish the human spirit.
I like that.
But of course, Eisenman has a very different take. He sees the sloped roof as a symbol of clinging to the past, holding on to these outdated ideas about what architecture should be.
Right.
He's like, we can't just replicate traditional forms without considering the needs and challenges of our modern world.
It makes sense.
It does. And that's where we start to see this real tension in their debate. Alexander is advocating for this return to a more human-centered approach, drawing inspiration from those timeless principles of design. But Eisenman is urging us to embrace the complexities of the modern world, experiment with new forms, new ideas, even if they challenge those assumptions about what a building should be.
So we've got this incredible clash of philosophies. Alexander's pursuit of harmony and wholeness versus Eisenman's embrace of dissonance and disruption.
And the debate is just getting started.
I can't wait to hear what happens next.
So we left off with Alexander championing the sloped roof and Eisenman pushing back. It's more than just roofs, though, right? This gets at something deeper about how they see buildings relating to people.
Exactly. For Alexander, architecture, it carries a moral responsibility. It's not just about, beautiful or interesting buildings. It's about shaping human experience in a positive way. He's worried that modern architecture, with all the abstract forms and rejecting the traditional elements, it's losing touch with that responsibility.
He even uses the term fashion to describe some architectural trends, suggesting that architects are more concerned with being trendy than creating spaces that really work for people. It's a pretty harsh critique.
Yeah, it is. And it goes right to the core of Alexander's philosophy, what he calls phenomenology. Basically focusing on how people actually experience a space, how it makes them feel, how it affects their interactions with each other and with the world around them.
So it's not just about the building itself, it's about the feeling it creates.
Yeah.
The memories, the sense of place it fosters. Makes sense. But how does Eisenman respond to that?
Well, Eisenman doesn't back down. He argues that just clinging to tradition for the sake of comfort can stifle innovation and limit what architecture can do. He thinks that sometimes a little discomfort, a little disruption, can be a good thing.
So he's not saying buildings should be unpleasant.
Right.
He's saying that challenging our assumptions about what a building should be can lead to new and exciting architectural experiences.
Basically, Eisenman is a big proponent of deconstructivism. It's a style that often breaks down those traditional forms, creating spaces that are kind of disorienting on purpose. He thinks this kind of architecture can make us more aware of our surroundings, challenge our perceptions, and ultimately lead to a richer understanding of the world.
It's like he's saying, don't just be in a space. Think about it, question it, interact with it on a deeper level.
Yeah. And he points out that throughout history, a lot of architectural innovations that we now consider masterpieces were initially met with resistance because they challenged the status quo. What seemed jarring or dissonant in one era can become like the standard of beauty in another.
Good point. Like the Eiffel Tower. When it was first built, people thought it was hideous, an eyesore. Now it's like the most beloved landmark in the world. So taste is subjective and changes over time. But how do we reconcile these two opposing views, Alexander's focus on harmony and Eisenman's embrace of dissonance? Can't a building be both functional and evocative?
That's the big question. And I think the answer is recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. The best design depends on the context, the purpose of the building, and the needs of the people who are going to use it.
So it's not about choosing sides, Team Alexander or Team Eisenman. It's about understanding what each approach brings to the table and recognizing that there are lots of ways to design a building.
And it's about being more aware of our own reactions to the places we're in. What makes you feel good in a space? What makes you feel inspired? What makes you feel uneasy? These are questions we can all ask ourselves, whether we're architects or just people who live and work in these places.
You know, it's funny. I've always loved libraries. There's something about that quiet atmosphere, the smell of old books, the sense of history and knowledge. It just makes me feel at peace. But I've also been in libraries that felt cold and sterile, like the architecture was discouraging you from staying or thinking. It makes a difference.
It totally does. And that goes back to what Alexander was saying about feeling. He would say that a well-designed library shouldn't just be functional, with easy access to books and a quiet place to study. It should also be evocative, creating a sense of welcome, inspiration, intellectual curiosity.
That's a great example. And it shows how these theoretical debates have real implications for how we experience the spaces we're in every day. So we've talked a lot about how buildings make us feel. But what about the architect's intentions? Do they matter?
That's another fascinating layer to all of this. Alexander would say that the architect's intentions are super important. He believes a building should reflect the architect's understanding of human needs and aspirations. But Eisenman is more interested in how a building is interpreted and experienced by the people who actually use it. He thinks the meaning of a building isn't fixed by the architect, but emerges through how people interact with the space.
So for Alexander, it's about the architect's vision, the message they're trying to convey. But for Eisenman, it's more about that open dialogue between the building and the people in it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can see this difference in how they analyze buildings. Alexander looks for evidence of the architect's intentions in the details, the materials, the light, the way spaces flow into each other. But Eisenman is more interested in how people move through a building, how they use the space, how their perceptions are shaped by the architecture.
It's like two different ways of reading a book. Alexander's closely reading the author's words, looking for clues to their meaning. But Eisenman's more interested in the reader's experience, how they interpret the story and connect it to their own lives.
And both approaches have their strengths. Understanding the architect's intentions can make us appreciate the thought and care that went into a building, but recognizing that a building can have multiple interpretations, that its meaning can change over time, opens up new ways of experiencing and interacting with architecture.
This is getting really interesting. So we've got these two contrasting philosophies. Alexander's emphasis on harmony and Eisenman's embrace of dissonance. We've seen how they play out in the buildings they analyze, but is there any common ground between these two?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore as we go into the final part of this debate.
Okay, so here we are, final round of this epic architecture showdown. Alexander and Eisenman have laid out their philosophies. They've gone head-to-head over specific buildings. Now it feels like they're both looking for that knockout punch, the final argument that'll win over the audience.
And, it's not just a theoretical debate. Their ideas have real consequences. The buildings they design, the spaces they create, those shape how we experience the world.
So let's bring it home for our listeners. What can we actually take away from all of this? What are the big takeaways that we can apply to our own lives, even if we're not designing skyscrapers or anything?
I think one of the most important things is realizing that architecture, it's never neutral. It always reflects the values and beliefs and even the anxieties of the time it was created.
You're right. Think about the grandeur of a Gothic cathedral reaching for the heavens, or the sleek minimalism of a modern skyscraper. It's a testament to technological progress. They tell a story about the culture that made them.
Exactly. And then those buildings, they shape how we interact with the world.
Yeah.
They can inspire us, challenge us, comfort us, or even, make us feel alienated. Alexander would say, a well-designed building should lift us up, create a sense of belonging, connect us to something bigger than ourselves.
And Eisenman might say that it should provoke us.
Yeah.
Make us question our assumptions, push us out of our comfort zones.
Yeah.
It's wild to think about how the buildings we're in every day, our homes, our workplaces, even just public spaces, how they can impact our mood, our behavior, our whole sense of well-being. It's like we're always having this conversation with our surroundings. even if we don't realize it.
And that brings us back to a main point of tension between Eisenman and Alexander. The role of feeling in architecture. Alexander believes a building should resonate with our emotions, create that sense of harmony and wholeness. But Eisenman is more interested in how it engages us intellectually, making us think differently, challenging our perceptions.
But can it be both? Like intellectually stimulating and emotionally resonant?
Definitely. I think the best architecture often does strike that balance. It's not about choosing one or the other, but seeing how those things can work together to create a richer, more meaningful experience.
So it's not about picking a winner in this debate. It's about seeing the value in both perspectives and using those insights to be more aware of how we experience these spaces.
I agree. And it's about asking ourselves what we value in architecture. Do we care more about how well it functions, how it looks, how it makes us feel? What kind of spaces do we want to create for ourselves and for the future?
Big questions. And this debate gives us some tools to think about them. We've learned about Alexander's phenomenology, focusing on the lived experience in a space.
Right.
And Eisenman's deconstructivism, that willingness to challenge the norms and create spaces that disrupt expectations.
But we've seen those philosophies in action, through the buildings they talked about, from Church Cathedral to the Palazzo Chiricati. Each one is like a case study, showing us that relationship between form, function, and feeling.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. Something to think about as they go about their day. Think about a building you love, a space that makes you feel something special. Whether it's awe, tranquility, maybe even a little mystery. What is it about that building that grabs you? What choices did the architect make that created that experience?
That's a great question. And I'd add, pay attention to how you feel in different spaces. Notice the details that catch your eye. The way light and shadow play on things. The sounds, the textures. Architecture is a language. And the more we understand it, the richer our experience of the world becomes.
I love that. So well said. That's a perfect place to end. We've covered so much today, from slope roofs to deconstructivist masterpieces. And I hope this deep dive has made you a little more curious about how architecture shapes our lives. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those deep dives going.